Hi and welcome to my channel, That Tash Reads. I'm That Tash and this is my first video here, so it's nice to see you and meet you all. This will be a channel that I'm hoping to dedicate to books and my love of reading. I'm really here because I want to be able to join the discussion on BookTube that happens and really just contribute to that discussion a little bit more than I have previously been, which is mostly just watching videos. I'm really hoping that this channel will be about books and talking about books. I don't get to talk about books as much as I really used to, which is a little disappointing. I'm also not reading as much as I would like, so I'm hoping by doing this it's going to give me a little bit of motivation to read. Most of the reason I don't read as much as I would like to is I work full time, I commute to and from work on a very crowded train, so it's not always comfortable having a book out even if I am reading on my phone. So I really want to overcome that a little bit. So I thought I'd start by introducing myself today. I do have a degree in literature, media and communications. I went to university as a mature age student in my late 20s. I loved my degree, but unfortunately I don't get to talk about books as much as I was at uni, so that makes me motivated to be here today. I read quite varied, I read quite widely as well. I'm usually reading spec fiction, so science fiction, fantasy, urban fantasy, a lot of that stuff. That's really what I always end up back reading. But, you know, as I said, I do read quite widely. So I thought I'd give you an example of some of the books that I do read. First book I thought I might talk about would be a book that I finished recently, and this would be High Rise by J.G. Ballard. This was published back in 1975. I love a lot of old science fiction, especially this kind of stuff. Introduced to a lot of this stuff by my dad. My dad impacted a lot of my science fiction reading, and it's probably why I like science fiction as much as I do. So thanks, Dad. This is fantastic. This is probably a prime example of some of the stuff that I like to read, and sums up probably a lot of my reading habits at the moment. I love classics, I love science fiction, I love fantasy, I love spec fic, and just modern contemporary fiction, and I think this is a prime perfect example of summing all that up in one book. Now High Rise is a little horrific. It's about a high-rise building in London that really becomes its own sort of inner community, and just the impact that has on the residents and what actually happens and how everything can just go wrong really quickly. I've described it to people as Lord of the Flies. This is the adult version in one building. It's fantastic. If you haven't checked it out, I really do suggest it. I haven't watched the film yet. The film came out in like 2016 or 2017. I've been told it's a good film. I don't know, I'm gonna have to watch it to find out, but J.G. Ballard's a great example of the kind of reading I do. This is The Ghost Pirates by William Hope Hodgson. This is a book that I'm reading at the moment. William Hope Hodgson is known for his occult writings, I guess you could describe him. He wrote about a detective, I guess you could call him, called Carnegie. He's a little bit of the Sherlock of the occult world. I've discovered recently William Hope Hodgson and his work through just exploring a little bit of the weird fiction that I seem to come across at the moment, through a variety of different ways. This is great. It's a little difficult of a book, but I am enjoying it. The language that is used does slow me down a little bit, just the jargon, just needing to say it out loud and reading it a few times just to really understand the language of the sailors back in the 1800s, but great book. Yes, another example of books that I like is one of my favourite authors, Haruki Murakami. This book is called After Dark. I read this for the second time recently. I first read it when I was travelling in Norway about 5 years ago. And I loved it then and I love it now. But it just explores Tokyo in one night. I know I enjoyed it reading it again the second time after spending some time in Tokyo, just really understanding just the kind of culture and experiences that these people might have. But it's a great book. I really do recommend it. I read it after reading 1Q84. Yeah, fantastic book. It would be remiss of me not to mention one of my favourite authors, Raymond Chandler. Raymond Chandler wrote a lot of crime fiction back in the 1940s and 1950s. The noir detective is kind of his kind of way of thing with Philip Marlowe. He wrote some amazing books. I tell everybody to read these, especially people who love crime. Farewell My Lovely, second book of his, not his first, but still, it's probably my favourite over The Big Sleep, but you know, it's a pretty great book. So far I haven't really shown you anything contemporary. I'm really bad at staying on top of my to read list. So usually when I buy a book it can sometimes sit around for a little while. Example of the more contemporary stuff that I read. The Travelling Cat Chronicles. I picked this up recently. I haven't read it yet, but I'm really looking forward to reading it. I love The Guest Cat. I read that probably about a year ago. So I'm hoping, you know, that sort of, you know, sticks along those lines a little bit. I've also found myself reading a lot of short fiction recently, most notably anthology series, as well as anthology magazines. So I read Aurealis, which is an Australian science fiction and fantasy magazine. I also read Asimov's, which is a science fiction magazine. I have a subscription to that, as well as I have a subscription to Occult Detective Quarterly, which is a magazine dedicated to the weird and wonderful occult detectives. I love it. I'm unfortunately really behind on it. I'm really only reading issue 2 at the moment, and I think we're up to issue 4 with that. If you like a Cthulhu kind of Lovecraftian, William Hope Hodgson kind of stuff, I'd really suggest checking out. It's that kind of thing. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I'm looking forward to hearing from you all. Plans at the moment is to release something weekly. I haven't decided on anything yet, but I'm really looking forward to continuing to do this. Thanks.